I built my life on trust, trust in numbers, trust in family, trust in my son. But when the police came knocking, accusing me of theft and fraud, I uncovered a betrayal so deep it shattered everything I knew. My own flesh and blood, my boy, had framed me, weaving a web of lies to bury me under his crimes. Every forged signature, every stolen dollar, was a knife in my back. But I didn't crumble. I turned the tables, gathering evidence in the shadows, letting him think he'd won, until the moment I struck back. Revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, calculated, and devastating. I let justice become my weapon, watching as the son I loved took the fall he'd planned for me. Want to know how far a father will go to reclaim his name? How betrayal can fuel a revenge so perfect it leaves no trace? Stick around. My story will hook you, break you, and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are viewing from. Kindly hit the like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal. They might just change how you see your own relationships. My whole life, I've believed in order. I'm a man of numbers. My name is Ethan. I'm 53 years old, a senior accountant for a mid-sized firm. My world is spreadsheets and ledgers, where every debit has a credit, and everything, in the end, must balance. My home office is my sanctuary, neat, quiet, and predictable. My wife, Lena, says I love my calculator more than I love her. She's joking mostly, but she understands. After 30 years of marriage, she knows that my need for control is what built the good life we have. The paid-off house, the college fund for our son, the comfortable retirement we're easing into. It's all built on a foundation of careful, meticulous planning. Our son, Ben, was the one variable I could never quite calculate. 24 years old, bright, charming, too charming. He could talk his way into anything and out of anything. He'd had stumbles. A failed semester at college, a car he couldn't afford the payments on, a few borrowed items from our home that somehow never found their way back. We always chalked it up to youth. Lena would say, he'll find his way. He just needs to apply himself. I wanted to believe her. I funded a small, startup business for him, a custom furniture workshop. I thought the responsibility would ground him. I was wrong. The first sign was a letter from the bank. A routine statement for a business savings account I rarely used. The balance was shockingly low. I frowned, pulling up the digital records. There were transfers I didn't recognize. Large withdrawals. My heart started a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. A mistake. It had to be a bank error. I'd built my career on finding other people's mistakes. I never made my own. I spent the evening tracing the transactions. Each click of the mouse tightened the knot in my stomach. The money hadn't just been moved. It had been expertly hidden, routed through a series of dummy corporations with names that were almost familiar. Names that sounded like clients of mine. A cold dread began to creep up my spine. This wasn't a random hack. This was personal. This was someone who knew my habits, my clients, my financial landscape. The final blow came the next morning. A formal, crisp email from my firm's HR department. Please report to a meeting with management and legal counsel at 10 a.m. The subject line was a cold fist to the gut. Internal financial review. I walked into that glass-walled conference room feeling like a man walking to his own execution. Two stern-faced partners and a woman I didn't know, a lawyer, sat waiting. They slid a folder across the polished table. We've received an anonymous tip, one of the partners began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. Substantial evidence suggests funds from the Henderson and Greaves corporate accounts have been misappropriated. The digital trail leads directly back to your login credentials from your home IP address. I opened the folder. Spreadsheets, transaction records, forged authorization forms. The work was good. Brilliant, even. It had my fingerprints all over it, but it wasn't my work. Someone had studied me. Someone had replicated my style with terrifying accuracy. I was suspended, effective immediately. My keycard was deactivated. I was escorted out of the building like a common thief, the silent, accusing stares of my colleagues burning into my back. I drove home in a daze, the world outside the windshield a blur. Who would do this? Who could do this? The answer was a ghost, a shadow I couldn't see. I went straight to my home office, my hands shaking as I booted up my personal computer. I had to find something, anything, to prove this was a setup. And then I saw it. A tiny, almost invisible icon in the system tray of my computer. A remote access program. One I didn't install. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just someone who knew me. This was someone who had been in my house. In my office. At my computer. The front door opened and closed. "Dad? You home?" It was Ben. His voice, usually so light, sounded strained. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at the screen, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, final certainty. The forged documents required a skill with design software. Ben had that. The dummy corporations had clever, pun-filled names. Ben's sense of humor. The transfers had been made late at night. Ben often stayed out late. He appeared in my office doorway, his face a mask of concern. "Hey, I heard what happened. From Mom. She's a wreck. This is insane. Who would do this to you?" I looked at my son. I saw the worry in his eyes. But for the first time, I looked deeper. I saw the flicker of something else behind the concern. A nervous energy. A calculated performance. And in that moment, the balance sheet of my life tipped irrevocably. The numbers didn't lie. The evidence was right in front of me. The person who had meticulously, cruelly, framed me for his own crimes was my only son. The silence in the house that night was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. Lena was upstairs, crying herself to sleep, her faith in her husband shattered. Ben was in his old bedroom, probably already crafting his next lie. And I was in my office, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my glasses, a detective in my own ruined life. The initial shock had hardened into a cold, sharp fury. It was a clean anger, the kind I could work with. It focused me. He thought he was smart. He thought he'd covered his tracks. But he'd learned from me, and I knew all his tells. I started with the remote access software. It was a common, commercially available program. The login was saved on the computer. It wasn't my email. It was a generic, anonymous-looking address. But the password was woodworker_88. Ben's workshop, Ben's birth year. He'd gotten arrogant. Careless. I now had proof he'd accessed my computer. But I needed to connect that access to the crimes. I began a methodical, painstaking audit of every transaction that had been flagged. I cross-referenced timestamps from the remote login logs with the exact times the fraudulent transfers were initiated. They matched. Perfectly. The empty bank account was just the beginning. What I found next made my blood, which had been cold, turn to ice. He hadn't just stolen from my business accounts. He'd taken everything. He'd taken a second mortgage on our house. The paperwork was flawless, the digital signature a perfect forgery. He'd emptied Lena's personal savings account, the one her father had left her. He'd even taken small, recurring amounts from our joint checking account, amounts just small enough to avoid immediate notice, bleeding us dry over months. This wasn't just about covering gambling debts or financing a failed business. This was systematic. This was annihilation. I heard a floorboard creak outside my office door. I minimized the windows instantly, pulling up a solitaire game. The door opened a crack. "Dad? Still up?" Ben's voice was soft, dripping with false concern. "You should get some rest. This will all get sorted out." "I'm just clearing my head," I said, my voice even, betraying nothing of the storm inside. "Don't worry about me." "I do worry," he said, and the sheer audacity of the lie made my jaw clench. "We'll get you a good lawyer. We'll fight this." He was including himself in my defense. The sheer, breathtaking gall of it was a masterpiece of manipulation. He was positioning himself as the loyal son, standing by his wrongly accused father, all while holding the knife he'd planted in my back. "Thanks, Ben," I said, the words ash in my mouth. "That means a lot." He closed the door. I waited until his footsteps faded upstairs before I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The game had changed. He wasn't just a betrayer. He was an actor on a stage of his own creation, and he was playing every part to perfection. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I thought of my old friend, Arthur. We'd worked together for 20 years before he retired. He was the only person I trusted who understood forensic accounting and, more importantly, understood me. I sent him a secure, encrypted message from a new account. No details, just a request to meet. He replied within minutes. The usual place. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. The usual place was a diner 20 miles away, a place we used to go for coffee to escape the office. The next morning, I told Lena I was going for a drive to think. She just nodded, her eyes red-rimmed and vacant. Arthur was already in a booth, 2 coffees steaming between us. He took one look at my face, and his own grew grim. Tell me everything. And I did. I laid it all out. The suspension, the evidence, the remote software, the mortgage, the drained accounts. When I told him my suspicion about Ben, he didn't look surprised. He just sighed a deep, weary sound. I always thought that boy was too clever for his own good, he muttered. What's your play? I have to let it happen, I said, my voice low. If I go to the police now with what I have, it's my word against a digital trail that points to me. He'll deny it. He'll say I'm a desperate man trying to frame my own son. They'll believe him. He's young, convincing. I look guilty. Arthur nodded slowly. So you let the investigation run its course. You let them build a case against you. While I build the real case against him, I finished. I need to gather irrefutable proof. Not just of the access, but of his motive, where the money went. I need to trap him. It's a dangerous game, Arthur warned. You could actually be charged. Arrested. I looked down into my black coffee. I know, but it's the only way. He's confident now. He's making mistakes. I need him to keep making them. I need him to think he's won. Arthur reached across the table and put his hand on mine. Then I'll help you. We'll bury him with the truth. Driving home, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was still there, but it was now a tool, not a master. I had a plan. I had an ally. And I knew with a chilling certainty that my son had no idea what was coming for him. The investigation was a wave rushing toward me, and I would have to let it crash over me, hold my breath, and wait for the water to clear. Only then would I be able to see him, standing alone on the shore, exposed. The days blurred into a haze of tension and pretense. Lena moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes avoiding mine, her voice a brittle whisper when she spoke at all. She'd hired a lawyer for me, a man named Robert Vance, a shark in a tailored suit who'd built his career on high-stakes financial crimes. He was confident, almost arrogant. The evidence is circumstantial, he told me after reviewing the prosecution's case. We'll poke holes in it. We'll show the world this is a setup. But his confidence felt hollow. He didn't know Ben. Didn't know how meticulous, how ruthless my son could be. Ben, meanwhile, played his role to perfection. He visited often, bringing Lena flowers, sitting with me at the kitchen table, offering to help sort through the financial wreckage. He'd even started sleeping on the living room sofa, claiming he couldn't bear to leave us alone during this nightmare. His performance was so convincing, so layered with false empathy, that I almost admired it. Almost. The breaking point came late one Tuesday night. I was in my home office, poring over bank records Arthur had smuggled out of the firm's secured servers, records the police hadn't subpoenaed yet. Ben had used a series of shell companies to launder the stolen money, but he'd gotten greedy. One of the accounts, registered under the name Summit Logistics, had a series of payments to a high-end art gallery downtown. Not for art, but for a single, extravagant purchase, a vintage limited edition wristwatch. A watch that now sat in a display case in Ben's workshop. I'd seen it there just days earlier, gleaming under the LED lights. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all crashing down on me. He hadn't just stolen my life savings, my career, my marriage. He'd used the money to buy himself a trophy, a symbol of his success. And he'd done it while sleeping under my roof, eating my food, pretending to be the dutiful son. Enough. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and final. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was finished being a pawn in Ben's game. Finished watching him twist the knife. I called Arthur. It was nearly midnight, but he answered on the first ring. "We need to move," I said, my voice low and tight. "Now." We met at the diner at 1 a.m. Arthur slid a file folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, transaction logs, and a high-resolution photo of the watch in Ben's workshop, its serial number clearly visible. "Proof of possession," Arthur said. "But it's not enough. We need the money trail leading directly to him." I nodded. "He's going to get reckless. He thinks he's won. He'll make a mistake." Arthur's expression was grim. "Maybe. But we can't wait for that. We need to force his hand." The plan took shape over bitter coffee and cold fries. We'd let the official investigation proceed. Let the police build their flimsy case against me. But behind the scenes, Arthur and I would construct an airtight case against Ben. We'd document everything. The remote access logs, the forged signatures, the shell companies, the watch. We'd even plant a tiny, undetectable tracking program on Ben's computer to monitor his communications. But the real masterstroke? We'd make Ben believe he was invincible. "How?" I asked. Arthur smiled faintly. "We give him what he wants. We let him think he's gotten away with it." The idea was simple, yet dangerous. We'd stage a scenario where Ben would be forced to move money again. This time, into an account we controlled. We'd make it look like a lucrative investment opportunity, tied to his shell companies. If he took the bait, we'd have him on money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. I hesitated. What if he doesn't take it? "He will," Arthur said. "He's addicted to the game, to the rush of beating the system. And he's already in too deep." Driving home, I felt a strange mix of dread and resolve. The plan was set. Now, I just had to survive the storm. The next morning, I walked into Robert Vance's office and dropped the photo of the watch on his desk. "My son bought this with the stolen money," I said. "I want you to use it." Vance raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," I lied. "And I want you to leak it to the press." His eyes gleamed. "That's a bold move, Ethan. But if it works..." "It will work," I said. "I want Ben to know the walls are closing in. I want him to panic." That afternoon, a local news outlet ran a story. Prosecutors probe link between fraud suspect's son and stolen funds. The photo of the watch was splashed across the screen during the evening news. Ben watched it in the living room, his face carefully neutral. But I saw the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against his knee, a tell I hadn't seen in years. He was rattled. Good. The trap was set. Arthur and I had created a fake investment firm, Horizon Ventures, with a slick website and forged credentials. We'd made it look like a golden opportunity for Ben's shell companies to diversify their portfolios. The bait was a low-risk, high-reward opportunity to move a large sum of money quickly, a move that would generate clean assets for Ben. All he had to do was transfer $500,000 from one of his accounts to ours. I held my breath as the days ticked by. Ben was quiet, withdrawn. He spent hours in his workshop, not woodworking, but on his laptop. I could only imagine the frantic searches, the paranoid theories. Had the police found something? Was there a leak? Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, the notification popped up on Arthur's computer. A transfer of $500,000 from Summit Logistics to Horizon Ventures. Arthur let out a low whistle. He took it, hook, line, and sinker. My hands shook as I forwarded the transaction records to Vance. "Now," I said. Vance moved fast. Within hours, he filed a motion to freeze all assets related to Ben's shell companies, citing new evidence of ongoing criminal activity. The police raided Ben's workshop that evening. I was in the living room, pretending to watch TV, when Ben burst through the front door, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. I looked up, feigning confusion. "Ben, what's wrong?" He stormed toward me, his eyes blazing. The police. They just raided my shop. They took everything. My tools, my computer, everything. I stood, my own anger rising to meet his. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice low and dangerous. But if you've done something. I didn't do anything, he shouted, throwing his hands up. This is your fault. You and your stupid lawyer. You're trying to ruin me. The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it almost made me laugh. I'm trying to ruin you? I stepped closer until we were face to face. You stole my life. You framed me. You destroyed our family. And now you're mad because you got caught. Ben's eyes widened. For the first time, I saw fear in them. Real, unadulterated fear. You don't know what you're talking about, he whispered. Oh, I know everything, I said, pulling out a sheaf of papers, copies of the transaction logs, the remote access records, the proof of the watch purchase. I know about the offshore accounts, the forgeries, the watch. I know you used my name to take out a second mortgage. I know you drained your mother's savings account. His face crumpled. Dad, save it, I snapped. The police are on their way. And this time, you won't frame anyone but yourself. As if on cue, a squad car pulled up outside. Ben whirled around, staring at the flashing lights. He looked back at me, his expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning horror. You set me up, he breathed. I met his gaze, my voice ice cold. No, Ben. You set yourself up. I just gave you the rope. The police entered, led by Detective Harris. Ben didn't resist. He just stood there, staring at me as they cuffed him, his eyes wide and unblinking. I'm your son, he said, his voice cracking. I looked at him, not with anger, but with profound sadness. You were, I said. The trial was a media circus. Ben's defense team tried to paint me as a bitter, vengeful father, but the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented a mountain of proof. The digital footprints, the forged documents, the watch, the coerced transfer to Horizon Ventures. Ben's shell companies collapsed like a house of cards. He was found guilty on all counts: grand theft, fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison, a harsher penalty than expected, given the extent of the crimes and the betrayal of family trust. Lena attended the sentencing, but we didn't speak. She filed for divorce shortly after, citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't fight it. The woman I'd loved for 30 years was a stranger now, her heart broken by the son we'd both adored. Some wounds never heal. As for me, I sold the house. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. I moved to a small apartment in the city, closer to Arthur and the few friends who'd stood by me. I took a job teaching accounting at a community college. It's quiet work, but it suits me. I help people understand the language of numbers, the same language Ben twisted into a weapon. Sometimes late at night, I think about Ben in his prison cell. Does he regret it? Does he even understand what he destroyed? I hope so. But I also know that some choices leave scars that never fade. The final twist came a year after the trial. A letter arrived, postmarked from the prison. Ben's handwriting was cramped and hurried. He apologized, of course. Said he'd been lost and desperate. Said he'd made a terrible mistake. He asked if I could ever forgive him. I read it once, then tossed it into the fireplace. Watched the flames consume the words. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. It isn't a ledger to be balanced. It's a choice. And I chose to let justice do its work. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But sometimes, the ashes make the ground fertile for something new. I closed my eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire. The storm had passed. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.